Matovu, Matovu, Ohalecha Yaakov, Mishkenotecha Yisrael, Matovu, Matovu, Ohalecha Yaakov, Mishkenotecha Yisrael. Hey everybody, Shabbos, good Shabbos. I am a little bit late. A little bit of drama going on here in the city, usual kind of thing. Happy to see all of you on this beautiful morning. I haven't seen some of you in a long time. And then some of you I just saw last night, Roberta Wall. Unbelievable. So we're so happy that some of you are around the corner and some of you are not yet around the corner. There's a lot going on here in the city. And just so you know, those of you who are city folk, New York City people, can't wait till everybody's back. If you're coming back, you could sure use your energy. So here we are this morning. I'm going to make the blessings of Torah. Just a couple of things. We started late and we're going to end early. How about that for a deal? We started late and we're going to end early because I'm leading the open book and I'm going to walk across the street to the sanctuary to get everything ready. And so just giving you a heads up, we're going to end at about 9:45. Any new people in this open book space right now? I haven't been in a while, and I won't be for the next month, but I'm here and I'd love to see. Anybody, any new people? Nobody? Okay, great. All kind of open bookers. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu l'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed is the source who on this Pride Day invites all of us to bring our voices and our hearts to the exploration, the interpretation, the revolution of Torah. Blessed are you, source of life, the great teacher of wisdom. Let's open up this sacred story. Today is Parsha Balak. My father's bar mitzvah parsha. Should live and be well. This is a story of power and prophecy and donkeys. Donkey. So we're gonna read this story, a little bit of the story, and then we're gonna open up for some questions and some thoughts around this mysterious donkey that appears in this week's third portion. And we discussed it a bit last night, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts and feelings and your interpretations. I'll share the screen with you. And simple sheet today. Lots going on. Let's see. You all see the text? You might be able to just look it up. We're not doing anything radical today. We're just going to be looking at a simple story. And you might want to look it up yourself or have your handy chumash with you. We're going to get some readers. Anybody want to read this morning? Any readers? If you'd like to read, let me just take a look at this. I'd like to read. I didn't see. Lauren, go ahead. I can't see. Lauren, go ahead.
I will reward you richly, and I will do anything you ask of me. Oh no, you took away my text. I can read it in my.
I know. I'm just trying to make it larger. Sorry. I pressed the wrong.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that. I will reward you richly, and I will do anything you ask of me. Only come and damn this people for me. Balaam replied to Balak's officials, though Balak were to give me his house full of silver and gold, I could not do anything, big or little, contrary to the command of the Lord my God. So you too, stay here overnight and let me find out what else the Lord may say to me.
Now, you know the story, Lauren. Give some context for those who might not know the story. I'm kind of assuming
Sure.
everything, but like up until this point, who's this guy Balaam and who's this guy Balak?
So Balak is the king of Midian. And he is fearful of the Israelites. He has just seen the Israelites slaughter the Amorites, and he's worried. So he calls this great
Who are you going to call?
diviner, the sorcerer, the Voldemort. I mean, no,
Yeah,
I feel like we're in Harry Potter land here, but he calls Balak, who's actually like far away by the Euphrates. And he asks him to come and put a curse on the Israelites.
Right. So that prophet's name is Balaam, right? That's Balaam.
Balaam. Yes. Sorry, there's Balak and Balaam.
Balak is the king. Balaam is the prophet, right?
Sorry, my husband's correcting me. He wants me to say Bilam.
Right. His name is Bilam, right? Bilam, Balaam. So we have a story like in the context of where we are in the actual narrative of the Exodus is also interesting, right? So last week the Israelites in Parshat Chukat they're forced to go the roundabout way because their brother, meaning their right Edom, the ancestral, the descendants of Esau, have not given them safe passage through their land, and so they're forced to go the roundabout way. They're going to go the much longer way around and in, and all of a sudden, right, and right, as you said, there had been already some conflict between the Israelites and the Amorites and others, so Sichon Melech HaAmori and so on. And here, right, the preemptive strike of Moab Midian, they want to make sure that they're safe. So that's the context. And in the context of that, we have this Balaam character or Bilam character arise. Interestingly enough, right after last week's portion where Moses has failed in his prophetic leadership to some degree and has been punished and told he would be punished by not entering the land because he hit the rock, we now have Bilam and Balak. And so Bilam is now going to be hired by Balak, and he says it's a longer story. I skipped the first chapter. It's a longer story. This is not just the first moment where he said, listen, I can't do it, but nonetheless, he's going to be listening for a prophetic wisdom from God to say, give him permission to go curse the people or not, right? So go on, verse 20, Vayavo Elohim el Bilam. Verse 20 is that night. Nope, you muted yourself. Lauren, you muted yourself.
Sorry. That night, God came to Bilam and said to him, if these men have come to invite you, you may go with them. But whatever I command you, that you shall do. When he arose in the morning, Bilam saddled his ass and departed with the Moabite dignitaries. But God was incensed at his going. So an angel of the Lord placed himself in his way as an adversary. He was riding on his she-ass with his two servants alongside, when the ass caught sight of the angel of the Lord standing in the way with his drawn sword in his hand. The ass swerved from the road and went into the fields, and Balaam beat the ass to turn her back onto the road. The angel of the Lord then stationed himself in a lane between the vineyards with a fence on either side. The ass, seeing the angel of the Lord, pressed herself against the wall and squeezed Balaam's foot against the wall, so he beat her again. Once more, the angel of the Lord moved forward and stationed himself on a spot so narrow that there was no room to swerve right or left. When the ass now saw the angel of the Lord, she lay down under Bilam, and Bilam was furious and beat the ass with his stick. Then the Lord opened the ass's mouth, and she said to Bilam, "What have I done to you that you have beaten me these 3 times?" Bilam said to the ass, "You have," next page, please. "You have made a mockery of me. If I had a sword with me, I'd kill you." The ass said to Bilam, "Look, I am the ass that you have been riding all along until this day. Have I been in the habit of doing this to you?" And he, Bilam, answered, "No."
Lauren, you're exhausted from reading that. I love that. Oh, how does it end? I don't know. How does it end? So, what an amazing story, right? So let's unpack this story, because what's the very next verse, of course, is that the angel appears to Balaam and scolds Balaam for not realizing that the chamor, that the donkey, that the she-ass was actually helping him and saving his life, and so on. Okay, what? This is such a wonderful story, isn't it? I mean, let's go into it. Let's open it up. What? So, I mean, I'm just gonna ask a couple of questions. All of you can feel free to jump in, and I'll take hands, and hopefully your answers will somewhat correspond to the questions I'm asking, or not. Who knows? But like, I'm just curious about this story. I'm curious about the story on many levels. One is, I'm curious about its purpose here. Like, why? What is this? What is the purpose of this story? Like, why are we being told this story at this point? And why does this story have this remarkably magical, mythic moment where, in other words, what does the story serve by having the donkey speaking? It's a really interesting plot point, right? Why not have the angel just say, as the angel does in the story of Abraham and Isaac, and there are a lot of resonances between this story and the story of Abraham taking his son Isaac up on the mountain in chapter 22 of the book of Genesis, right, where essentially Abraham is also on the road to do something that God, quote unquote, is ambivalent about. Like, am I sure that God wants to do this, or I'm not really sure that God wants me to do this? He packs a chamor. He also banks a donkey. He brings his 2 lad servants, like the na'arav is the intertextual hook that connects us to the Akedah in chapter 22. He brings his lads, and here too, this strange prophet brings na'arav, his lads. Right, we have this remarkable story about kind of an ambivalent journey to curse, to bless, to be at the disposal of a nefarious plan. There seems to be some kind of question in the mind of Bilam, like maybe God really would be interested in having me do this or not. That's interesting. Like, really, what's the ambivalence, Bilam? Really, God wants you to go curse this people? And then the donkey moment, like this, what is up with this ass? What is up with this donkey? And what plot is it? So I'll say outside before I, just give you a couple of the interpretive modes of our ancestors. There are some, like Maimonides and those who followed in his way, who see this all as a story about the God of Israel versus the pagan gods, right? And that there is like a necessary prophylactic being placed here. Like, don't you dare think that those gods are really powerful. In the end of the day, right, you Israelite, you worship the true God and not the false God. Bilam is a false God prophet, and in the end of the day, I win, right, when it comes to that too, and not to be led astray. There's another interpretive mode that sees all divination. This is certainly a form of divination, and sees this as a kind of a pushback on any any recourse to divination, right? Don't go, tamim tiya im Adonai Elohecha, the verse in Deuteronomy says, be wholesome, and don't be running after these other sources of divine inspiration and wisdom. And in those those modes, Bilam is stupider than his donkey. The donkey serves a purpose of making light of the prophets of the non-Jews or the non-Israelite prophets, because they're not even aware that there's an angel in front of them, and the donkey is actually smarter than the prophet. So some of those things, but I don't know where you guys are going to go. I'm going to open the book up to Jill and then Jay, Beth, and we'll see where we go from there. Jill, Jay, and Beth. Go ahead, Jill.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Sorry I'm not on video right now. I just wanted to ask a question. I was wondering if the fact that it's not pointed out that the donkey's talking as being unusual and he just goes straight into arguing with the donkey, whether people were talking to animals at that time, because that doesn't seem to be what's highlighted here, that it's unusual that the donkey is talking. It's unusual to us for sure, but yeah, so I was just wondering about that.
I mean, it's a good question. We don't have other instances of talking animals in quite this way, but certainly the donkey is a pretty important biblical character in other places, in a number of other places, in chapter 22, in the book of Genesis, in the legal corpus of Judaism, in the messianic and the prophetic, right? There's Rochev al Chamor, like to be riding on a donkey is a messianic sign of humility. And so, the donkey speaking here certainly doesn't take Bilam by surprise, or at least he doesn't let us know, you're right. But there is something divine about it, just the way the ground opens up and swallows up Korach, Vatiftach Adonai et Adama, like God opens up the ground. Vatiftach Adonai et Piaton, like the verse tells us that God was the one who opens the mouth of the donkey, and that seems miraculous and anomalous, actually. The fact that God we're told that God intentionally opens this donkey's mouth to speak. And, the rabbis have a field day with this. Of course, one of the 10 things that are created on Friday and, at twilight in the Pirkei Avot, in the ethics of the ancestors, in the aphorisms of the ancestors, is this donkey, like somehow was created. And people have a hard time with that too, supernaturalism. So I don't know how frequently animals are speaking, but it's certainly, you're right. And it's good to note that he's not shocked by the whole thing, right? Nor is he shocked to be seeing an angel, for that matter. Apparently, like, all he had to do was be told that there was an angel, and all of a sudden now the angel speaks to him and is like, oh, angels. And there are some who actually see this all as one big prophetic dream. Those who kind of find the supernaturalism of it to be problematic say that this is a chazon nevuah, that he has a vision here. It's not actually happening in real time, but more in a prophetic state. And in that sense, this whole thing is more like a dream. So good question. Thank you so much for that. Jay, go ahead.
Shabbat Shalom. I have 3 questions, but Jill asked one of them. Thank you, Jill. In verse 18, when Bilam says, I get them confused, when he says he's going to wait for God to give him his orders, he says, Yud He Vav He Elohai. And so that's kind of strange, given all the commentary that it's the conflict between different gods, that he actually uses Yud He Vav He in that context. So that's question number 1. Question number 2, there's a tradition that angels talk to prophets. So is the donkey a prophet?
Question. So angels also talk to people in the Torah, and not necessarily, quote unquote. So good question. I don't know the answer. At least in our tradition, we don't call the donkey a prophet, but why not? I guess, he certainly has some kind of divinely inspired information here. And in many Hasidic renderings of this, of course, the word chamor is almost always read playfully and misread, but also beautifully misread as a connection to the word chomer, which means matter. And so whenever you see kind of a chamor, you'll often see in later, much later rabbinic interpretive modes, this kind of being a reference to materialism, or not materialism, but matter, like corporeality. And so the speaking matter, the matter that speaks, of course, is the body. It is, the universe. And so there's a lot made of that, and the prophetic quality of listening to the body or listening to the world around us, and that everything speaks. It's just we don't always hear it speaking, and so there's a lot of that there. I don't know again if the donkey has a prophetic mantle, but it's a sweet idea. And I think in your second question, Yud Hey Vav Hey, again, there is a polemic happening here, but the fact that Yud Hey Vav Hey is interacting with this prophet is not surprising. It's just that the prophet is not getting a clear download. That's what some of like the Aked Yitzchak and other medieval commentaries, they say, how could it be that God got angry when the prophet, God said go, and so the prophet went, right? So apparently the way to work that out is to say that this Bilam was connecting with that divine algorithm, that divine Wi-Fi, as it were, that is called Yud Hey Vav Hey, that is our, as it were, true signal, but it was a weak signal, and that the Jewish prophets have a strong signal, and the non-Jewish prophets have a weak signal. That's kind of one way.
But in verse 18, he says, Yud Hey Vav Hey, my God. That's the part that's a little surprising to me.
Right. So apparently, he in some of the sources, he actually was one who was polyamorous with various divine deities. And this one also, at this point, had become clear that this was a conflict that was happening between the God of the Israelites and other gods, but that he had already been won over to like the Yud Hey Vav Hey, but he still had a weak signal because after all, he's not, he doesn't have a Jewish soul. That's kind of the way that it works out in later sources. Okay, thank you for that. Okay, asking good questions. Beth.
Shabbat Shalom.
Hello, Beth.
My favorite character is this she-ass. I consider her a prophet. She obviously connected with Hashem through her proprioceptive senses, as many animals do. And she was aware of the angel and all that. And I love her behavior toward Bilam, the way she pushes him into tight places. She goes from being a normally compliant equine to being a really bratty school horse who's running the rider into branches and just acting up because she knows better than he does. And I find this all very believable, especially considering that she's a mare, because that is, mares are marish. What can I tell you? So I think she's a very delightful prophet. And as far as her speaking goes, animals talk to us all the time, and they always have. And especially any animal in the equine family, they definitely talk. They're very intelligent beings. And they have a way of communicating with us that we do not always hear. So I don't find this story fabulous in any way. I find it completely believable.
Yeah. The question for the readers, though, is, like, if you're living in an agrarian society and you know that your horse and your mare and your other animals are communicating, then the story doesn't really, but I just want to say the story doesn't really, the purpose of the story, though, is for the donkey to be speaking in a way that is not usual for the donkey. Mm-hmm. Like Yiftach Adonai Piaton, not like that. It's certainly true that our bodies are communicating, but I'm wondering, before we even render it that way, because I'm like equine therapy, I'm with you, Beth. Oh my God, like, and just the ability to sync, temple gradient, shalom, all of those are I'm good with that, and I've seen it with my children. I've seen it, but I'm wondering, what is the heuristic purpose? Like, what is the purpose of the writer? Like, this writer is talking to a group of people, and what is, why this, and also what's the meaning of this, of the way that the donkey is communicating is by squeezing the leg of Balaam or Bilam to the sides. They're in a vineyard, they're in the Mishol HaKramim, right? So there are some rabbis who talk about the connection between this, and they make it very allegorical about the 3 pilgrimage festivals having to do with the regel or the legs, right? And they talk about that and how there's some interesting. But I'm just wondering, like, why?
Could I butt in here?
Oh, butt in, please.
Normally, the rider is communicating with the horse or the equine through the use of the legs, and she's inverting that, and she's squeezing him on his leg. So she's totally flipping the normal rider equine relationship upside down by her behavior.
Totally. So she's really in control, which is frustrating to him, which is a wonderful metaphor for a million things that we don't have control over, and the ways that we, how we don't listen. Like, there's a failure of listening. Bilam is supposed to be a prophet, right? It's all about seeing, but he can't, like, the whole story is about someone who's supposed to be a seer, but he can't see, and how he's supposed to be a listener, but he can't listen, right? He's going to listen to what God will say, but he can't even take the cues of his donkey, let alone hear what God has to say. And you're right, it's an inversion of that. So it's a very powerful way of subverting, like, the hierarchy here of prophet and donkey. And as you said, donkey becomes the prophet, right? The donkey's the prophet. All right, we learn a lot from all of these things. Roberta, go ahead. Thank you, Beth.
Yeah, hi, Shabbat Shalom. Yeah, I'm thinking about what has been, from what we've seen, the relationship between the Israelites and animals, and its sacrifice, starting with how we got out of Egypt. And so this is teaching us something new, because, right, we're just seeing in all these parshiot that you are not ready. Your consciousness is still enslaved in something, and you're not in right relationship, like you said, to the natural world. So I see it as a teaching, and I see it as the indigenous peoples of the region have a lot to teach us, and that we have to figure out, this parsha also says, right, we are people apart. And so what does it mean to be a distinct people apart, and be in right relationship to indigenous people, to the animal world, to the natural world? I think, to me, that's, I don't know if that was in the head of why however this was channeled came out, but that's what I get from this. And this we see now today, this is the task of our people. How do we come into right relationship with other people and with the natural world? So.
Beautifully said. Thank you so much, Roberta. Thank you. Bob, go ahead.
I want to build on Roberta's natural world analogy. Right now, we look at separate difficulties: droughts in the West, hurricanes in the South, shifting soil in Florida under poorly constructed buildings, and we see them as separate incidents. Who is our donkey to say we are changing the climate, we are changing the world, and that is accelerating this? Dibarti.
Mati. Last night in my sermon I talked about, like, the deeper structure of this, of course, is that resistance often is the teacher. Not always. Like, the shadow of that, of course, is that we're going to push through, I'm going to push through no matter what. That was Bilam, and he was trying to push through no matter what. And he needed to stop and listen to the resistance that was before him. And the information there, and what's remarkable, of course, in what I said last night, and I come to this every year, is that the allied, like, the moment of undoing Bilam is when the chamor, when the donkey, the Shia, says, is there any reason for you to assume that where's the pattern here? Like this is anomalous for me, so why not, it's not usual, so wake up. Like, something that's unusual should give you pause, it's not usual for me to take you if I was that kind of Shias, right? And so that's a kind of a wonderful interrogation of trust. And I think that this year, I mean, I'm very strongly feeling that the theme for Romemu and for a lot of us in the coming year is how we rebuild trust. How do we awaken trust again in our bodies, in ourselves, in our governments, in our health system, in the various places, and how do we rebuild that without, right, ignoring the things that are legitimately needing to be reformed and transformed, all of that. But like there's a significant loss of trust, and you can feel it, right? And so there's some way that that this beautiful Shias is saying, wait a second, we've been friends. Like there's got to be it's not usual for me to hurt you this way. I must be, why don't you ask me instead of hitting me? And I can't not think of Moses and how he failed in his anger management moment last week, and then here Bilam being chided for why are you hitting me? Like, is that going to help? There's so much here. I know we unpack it, but we're gonna close at 9:45. I'm honoring that 6 minutes, so I'm gonna take the hands that are up and go ahead, David Kurtz.
Shabbat shalom.
Hello.
I love this parsha. I've always wondered or thought it'd be fun to write, meanwhile, what's going on in the rest of the world. And this gives us an insight into that. We've been following, Moses, the Israelites, and here this isn't about Moses and the Israelites. It's about what's going on in the rest of the world. Everybody concentrates on the monotheistic. It's really a henotheistic. It's a land of, the world is filled with gods. God acknowledges that. God says, you will have no other gods before me. And so the Israelites are now traveling back into that land with all these other gods, and they're failing miserably, including Moses, like you said. And so here we have a look of, it actually brings me back to the Exodus story, back to it with Pharaoh. I mean, Moses made fun of the sorcery that was involved in that, showed the diminution of the power of Pharaoh. And here we have the diminution of the power of Balaam. And, it's amazing that, to me, as everybody's failed in leadership, except Joshua and Caleb, and now we have Phineas at the end of this, who, it's about leadership and about holding on to what the next generation is going to do. The old generation is gone. Moses is about to lead the scene, and this is how we have to lead. So it's an amazing story. And the question I have is, why is it called Balak? Thank you.
Yeah, it's one of those. I was thinking the same thing. First of all, thank you for all of that. And I've thought every year, I think this too, that the main character, of course, should be called Bilam or Balaam, but it's not the way that the rabbis constructed. The first significant word is Balak, and so they name it for Balak. This one of a number of parshiot that are named for non-Jews in the Torah. Interestingly enough, so it's kind of a wild thing that Balak is the name of the parsha, as you note. A lot of fear. Balak's fear kind of initiates something. Doesn't really work out for him. And then kind of the overarching theme, of course, of the parsha is, don't worry, Israelites. God will thwart any of your enemies. We have ways, right? We have a Mossad. We have ways, but the tragedy of the parsha, of course, is that Balak might have done much better for himself and for everyone had he not been so afraid. So, yes to all of that you said. Barbara, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Shabbat shalom. I was going to kind of speak a little bit the way about in the same way that David Kurtz was talking, so he mostly said it. But I'm struck by, the existence of all these different gods that are acknowledged as being part of that world that they're in, and all the different peoples. And I'm always struck when people, even today, say, oh, well, we're worshiping, you worship your God. And I'm thinking, well, what does that really mean? And this kind of, to me, points to that same question, no matter how, quote, unstrong or weak we think another God may be. We're all living here together, and we're still having trouble, all living together. And perhaps the story of the she-ass is reminding us to look at that in our present moment, each present moment, every time we read it, which I think we have been talking about, but just another way to say it. So that's it for me.
Yeah, that's it's an interesting exploration in general of the multiple gods and what we mean by that. And certainly when we're looking at the Bible together from the perspective of 2,000 years and change away from it, its language can be like, that's what we're doing here, trying to interpret and trying to decipher it. And what does it mean for us in a world of pluralism, in the world where we acknowledge multiple faith traditions and different access points, multi-access, right? So the Torah is certainly polemically engaging with the Near East and the ancient Near East and all the gods. And certainly from a biblical perspective, there was no belief in the Bible that there weren't other deities or there weren't other forces, but just that the God of Israel was the supreme force, right? And that's certainly the case. But that's a much larger conversation that you invited. Maybe we'll have that at some point. Friends, even though I'm seeing hands, I can't honor. I'm sorry, we run out of time, and I just want to thank all of you. I thank all of you for raising your hands, and I don't want to discourage you, but today we have to stop a little bit earlier. There was a bit of I had a bit of a security threat. I have to go over to the chapel, and it kind of needs me to, I had an interesting night. There was an interesting situation, but that's not for now. But I'm going to be going over to the sanctuary. I want to thank all of you for learning Torah together with us this morning. A little bit late and a little bit early, but 40 minutes of Torah is better than no time of Torah. I'll be away for all the month of July and possibly some of August as well, but I'll see you guys, God willing, closer to the end of the summer. And I look forward to being back, online with everybody and on site with everybody as we make our way towards the Chagim. And hopefully I'll see some of you in the sanctuary in a couple of moments. Good Shabbos, everybody. Good Shabbos. There's another Zoom link in there, so take a look at the Zoom link to join us as well in the sanctuary. Shabbat Shalom.